Nothing will stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one.
There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My Nerd World.
Just let it in.
It is My Nerd World, and welcome to it. A Star Wars podcast. I am your host, Jon Justice, here for a bonus episode of a Star Wars podcast. So, if you are seeing this in your feed and have not listened to this week's episode that came out a few days ago, be sure you go back and take a listen to that. I know sometimes, depending on what your podcast feed settings are, the latest episode will go and replace the one that came out before it. And so if you happened to not listened to this week's episode from a few days ago, go and check that out. The reason why I'm doing a bonus episode today is because I wanted to alter a bit of my theory and commentary surrounding Far, Far Away Ahsoka Episode 6 ahead of next week's Episode 7. I've been thinking a lot about it and listening to a lot of other podcasts and actually going back and having watched Episode 6 now for a fourth time. I'm beginning to have a different theory relating to Baylan Skoll and what he is being drawn to on Peridia or Peridia, however you want to go and pronounce that. So in the episode earlier this week, I laid out that I think we have three different factions coming to a head, and I want to tell you my theory of what I think is going to happen over the course of the next two episodes. I have no information, no insider information on this, purely my speculation on what I think is going to play out for the last two episodes of Ahsoka. But as I talked about in the episode earlier this week, everybody was pointing to some other threat being out there that Baylan Skoll was drawn to. Clearly, his motivations have been different than that of Morgan Elsbeth, even though I feel he wants to take advantage of what Thrawn has to offer, sort of using Thrawn and whatever he does in coming back to power. Baylan Skoll can go and accomplish whatever his goal happens to be. In the middle of all this, you have Shin Hati, who just seems very reluctant. She's certainly loyal to Baylan Skoll, but she's almost playing the role of us, the viewer, in this story, where she's trying to find her way and she's trying to figure things out. I thought it was interesting in Episode 6 when Baylan Skoll was speaking about the time in the Order, and I'm pretty sure it was Episode 6. I've been watching all of them over again, so they're kind of getting mixed. But at one point, Shin Hati mentions, "Oh, so I'm like a Jedi," and Baylan says, "No, you're not like a Jedi. I trained you to be something different." But the motivating factor for Baylan is coming to a head, and did in this Episode 6, where he's talking about being drawn to something and this other force that's out there. And I've listened to a lot of speculation about what that other force could be. My assumption, as I mentioned in the episode earlier this week, was that this is a direct line to The Rise of Skywalker and Poe Dameron, somehow Palpatine return that's become a meme by now, which I don't mind. I love The Rise of Skywalker. I love the fact that it was Palpatine pulling the strings the whole time. I know that it was unconventional the way we got to that point with the introduction of Snoke. That was probably not the idea of what J.J. Abrams had in mind, and having Rian Johnson come in and kill Snoke off kind of turned that on its head. It's all very reminiscent, though, of what happened with George Lucas in the original trilogy. And that's why I think, before I get back to more of my Baylan Skoll theory, that's why, for me, the sequel trilogy gets just unwarranted, unjustified hate. It's all subjective, I get it, but when you go back to the original trilogy, Luke was supposed to have a sister, but it wasn't going to be Princess Leia. So in The Empire Strikes Back, when Yoda says there is another, when Luke heads off to Bespin to go save Han and Leia and his friends, initially George Lucas did that, and this is available in some of the books in the archives around Star Wars. He's talked about this. George Lucas was kind of leaving the door open for Luke to potentially go to the dark side. There was a possibility that could happen in the final film. And he was supposed to have a sister who would have been fully trained in the Force. And this is something that J.J. Abrams would go and pick up on later on in The Rise of Skywalker, with that amazing flashback sequence with Leia and Luke. Then, of course, it ended up changing, and Leia ended up becoming Luke's twin sister, as opposed to a different twin sister altogether who's been trained in the Force. Okay, and then she would train after the events of Return of the Jedi in the canon that we have now, which is why you get the awkward kiss between Luke and Leia at the beginning of The Empire Strikes Back, which we just kind of all retcon in our brains. So when you look at the way that Palpatine played out in his return in The Rise of Skywalker, and the complaints that the sequel trilogy gets about how they didn't plan anything out. Well, you know what? Star Wars has always been this way, and the original trilogy that everybody loves, including myself, had its own share of wonky things that ended up changing midstream as well. So, back to my Baylan Skoll theory. I had initially thought that was the most likely thing to happen storytelling-wise, that Ahsoka would be leading up to the reintroduction of Palpatine later on, and potentially even it's Snoke out there. Watching the episode over again, I'm beginning to see why everybody else is being pointed in a different direction with regard to what is drawing Baylan out. I don't necessarily want to see, and I don't think that it's good storytelling if they bring in another big bad in this series. But what they could do is introduce a bad element, a bad guy, an evil in the background that could serve a purpose way down the line in the storytelling. Or get resolved and just have it kind of sit there to be used later on in storytelling. So, for example, let's say the Baylan Skoll ends up finding whatever this dark side, dark feeling force that's drawing to him, that he's being drawn to, on Peridia in the next episode. And it's one of those circumstances where, you know what, you probably shouldn't have sought it out because it ultimately means he meets his demise. Like, what he finds is too powerful for him to deal with, and it ends up killing him. I'm riffing off of all movies, Indiana Jones and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, when the villain, played by Cate Blanchett at the end, finally comes in contact with the not transcendental, but the transmedium aliens, right? Give me all the knowledge, and she ends up succumbing to the dark force. I think that's more likely, just based, not that particularly, but it's more likely this is something else other than a direct line to Palpatine, simply because it seems to be very specific to that planet that they are on at the moment. So we'll see how this shakes out. I hope there is some connection here to what we've seen in Mando, and I feel like there's been a lot of groundwork made to bring about a backstory to Snoke, the cloning, the return of Palpatine. I'm not as confident as I was earlier this week that that's what Baylan is being drawn to at the moment, just because this seems to be very specific to this planet. And if they leave, and when they leave this planet, it's in an entirely different galaxy, so it makes all the sense that this threat would just be parked out there. This could also be connected to some of the storytelling that we're supposed to get in the years to come about the inception of the Jedi and the inception of the Force, a location of the beginning of the Force. It could also be pointing to that. I mean, this planet is the origin of the Night Sisters. So that could be a part of it as well. This is how I feel these next few episodes are going to play out, because I feel like this show is going to end on a down note. We know that from stepping outside of the storytelling for a moment and just from a production standpoint and what we can get as fans and expect, there's supposed to be an Ahsoka Season 2, but I've also heard that if Ahsoka Season 1 wasn't as successful as they hoped, that Dave Filoni would still be able to make his movie that will be the culmination of all of the Mandoverse tales that we've seen, of the Book of Boba Fett, Mandalorian, Ahsoka, perhaps the Skeleton Crew when it gets released as well. So this series could be the endpoint for Ahsoka, and then the next time that we get back into the world of Ahsoka, it'll be this storytelling crossover of a major event that wraps up the whole story. I think the show has been pretty successful. I'm actually looking at a story right now from Deadline. The premier Nielsen ratings debuted at number 2 in streaming originals, number 5 for overall series. It's doing on par with the other Star Wars shows for the most part, and I think the viewings of Ahsoka is going to grow as word of mouth continues to grow about how great this show is. So here's what I think is going to play out, and then I was going to keep this short, and I'm trying to. The next episode is going to take place on Peridia. You're going to have Ahsoka arrive with the Purrgil. The Night Sisters are going to unleash some sort of dark magic. Probably going to find out what's in those caskets, although that could wait. This was part of the deal, too. Going back and watching this episode again, this was part of the deal as to why the Night Sisters are helping Thrawn, and that is to get these, I believe, to get these crates out of the catacombs, these caskets or whatever they are, out of the catacombs, onto the Chimera and off this planet. So we may not see what's in these in the next episode. Perhaps it's the last episode, or those just lie in wait for something later on. I'm still convinced these are undead stormtroopers with the red ribbon tied around them that's probably powering whatever is left of their bodies inside of their armor. But there's going to be a battle on the planet, and I think you're going to have multiple factions involved. You're going to have, Ahsoka, Sabine, Ezra. The lightsaber situation is going to be interesting, by the way, because Sabine has Ezra's lightsaber. And by the way, Sabine needs to always use the lightsaber. If you watch the show, like, she's getting her butt kicked until she pulls the lightsaber out, and then usually she can kind of hold her own. She still gets her butt kicked a few times, but when she was attacking the nomads on the planet, it made me laugh because she was losing until she pulled out the lightsaber and did better. And the same thing happened with Shin Hanti back on Cetos. She was just using her blasters, and then when she got her lightsaber out, then she was able to go and hold her own. So we've got an issue as it relates to the lightsaber because we're down one. I suppose Ahsoka could hand off one of her 2 lightsabers to Sabine. That would be pretty rad. So you're going to have a battle. It's going to involve Sabine, Ahsoka, and Ezra against the undead soldiers and the Night Sisters. Plus, you're going to have Baylan Skoll and Shin Hanti with the nomads. Now, there's a possibility that they could turn on Thrawn and the Night Sisters. Baylan Skoll could. Shin Hanti has been, again, sort of teetering this whole series so far, and I think that's kind of up in the air as to which way she's going to go in terms of her allegiance. My speculation is that the Chimera will get hooked up to the giant hyperspace ring, and it will then fly back to the normal Star Wars galaxy, and that our heroes will again be stuck on the planet, probably having to use the Purrgil to get back. In the final episode, I fully expect that the Chimera shows up, the New Republic isn't ready, probably shows up back at Cetos, and the Republic ends up sending those 3 Republic cruisers to go and either investigate or attack. We're going to get some sort of space battle. This is where Hera will come back into play along with Jason. Probably a We'll probably get Zeb in the final episode. He has not been in the series yet. That would be a good way to wrap it up. He's obviously working with the New Republic. We saw him in a Blue Squadron flight suit in the Mandalorian Season 3. And then at the end of the episode, you're going to end up having Ahsoka, Ezra, and Sabine show back up, maybe for the last part of the battle to finally drive them away. But ultimately, Thrawn is going to kick the New Republic's butt. And the New Republic's going to realize what a threat they are. And this could be the seeds for the New Rebellion, where you have this inner struggle going on of the New Rebellion, the New Republic not buying into the threat that Thrawn is, with the factions saying, we got to band together, and the New Republic going, no, we're not going to bother with it. And there you have the split to create the resistance. All right. That's my theory. I'll have another episode next week after episode 7, but I just wanted to update it. Thanks for checking out this episode. As always, like and subscribe to the show. Leave me a comment on YouTube or drop me an email, Jon Justice. And I hope you enjoyed this bonus episode. And again, if you didn't listen to the episode earlier this week, be sure you go and find that from Thursday. So hope you're having a fantastic weekend. You're happy, you're healthy, you're safe. And I'll talk to you in a little bit less than a week. Bye.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.